when a fragile little girl in a wheelchair insisted on meeting the most dangerous dog in the shelter. Every staff member begged her not to. They warned her again and again, "Stay away from that one. He's too far gone. He can't be saved." But the girl didn't listen. She rolled her chair closer and closer, her small hands trembling against the wheels. Everyone in the shelter held their breath, waiting for the worst to happen. And then, instead of lunging, instead of growling, the dog they all feared, Atlas, a massive scarred German shepherd, did something no one expected. What unfolded in that moment stunned the entire shelter and became a story that spread through Willow Creek and later across the world. Atlas had been in the Willow Creek Animal Shelter longer than any other dog. He was impossible to miss, towering over the other dogs, his thick fur mottled with scars, his eyes a haunting shade of amber that seemed to hold more pain than rage. On the clipboard hanging from his kennel, the word aggressive was scrawled in thick red marker, underlined twice. Beside it, caution, do not handle. Every morning, volunteers approached his cage with dread. He would stiffen the second anyone came near, lips curling back, teeth flashing. His muscles would quake with tension, as though he was ready to explode at any second. "Leave him be," one staff member would mutter, sliding his food bowl in quickly. Some dogs just can't be fixed. No one knew exactly what had broken him, but everyone could see that something had. He had been found on the outskirts of town months before, filthy, ribs jutting through skin, a frayed rope digging into the raw flesh of his neck. During the ride back to the shelter, he growled without stopping. And once inside, he never wagged his tail, not once. Instead, he paced endlessly, back and forth, as though he was searching for something that had been ripped away. At night, when the shelter grew quiet, his howls carried down the halls. They weren't the ordinary cries of a dog. They were deep, broken, human-like sobs that unsettled even the hardest hearts. Most people stopped believing he could ever be saved. Most people gave up, but Atlas had not always been that way. Years earlier, Atlas had belonged to a boy, not much older than Clara. That boy would tug at his ears, bury his face in Atlas's fur, and fall asleep with his head resting on Atlas' back. Atlas lived for those days, running through fields, chasing tennis balls, lying under the stars as the boy whispered secrets into his ears. But then came the betrayal. The boy's family moved to another town. The boy begged his father not to leave Atlas behind. He cried into Atlas' fur, whispering, "I'll come back for you, I promise." But the father had other plans. One morning he tied Atlas to a tree with a rope, muttered, "He'll be fine," and drove away. Atlas waited. He barked until his throat was raw. He cried until no sound came out. He tugged at the rope until it cut deep into his neck. Days passed. Nights grew colder. The boy never came back. When strangers finally found him, Atlas was half-starved, rope burned into his skin, his eyes wild with confusion and betrayal. The world he once trusted had abandoned him, and from that day forward, Atlas trusted no one. That was the dog Clara wanted to meet. The bell above the shelter door chimed as her mother pushed her inside. Clara's thin hands rested in her lap, her long brown hair tied back with a pink ribbon that matched the rims of her wheelchair. Her eyes were quiet but steady, the eyes of someone who had already seen too much. "You sure about this, honey?" her mom asked softly, her hands tightening on the chair's handles. Clara nodded. "I just want to meet them." Her voice was small, but there was something steady beneath it. The receptionist smiled warmly, though her eyes flicked toward the end of the corridor where Atlas's kennel sat, cloaked in shadow. Volunteers quickly opened doors for the gentler dogs. A golden retriever wagged his whole body. A beagle tried to leap onto Clara's lap, licking her fingers until she laughed. But even as she smiled, her gaze drifted down the aisle, toward the darkness, toward him. When they reached Atlas, the shelter manager hurried forward, anxiety etched across her face. "Sweetheart, maybe we skip this one," she urged gently. "That dog, he doesn't do well with visitors." From inside the kennel, a growl rolled low and threatening, vibrating through the bars. Clara tilted her head, listening. She couldn't see his bared teeth from her angle, but she could hear the pain tangled in the sound. "I want to meet him," she whispered. Her mother froze. "Clara, please, not this one." But the girl's eyes never wavered from the shadows. Something in her voice, fragile yet certain, made everyone else step back. To understand why Clara refused to give up, You have to know her story. Just a year earlier, Clara had been a lively 9-year-old who loved climbing trees, chasing her dad through the yard, and racing down the sidewalks of Willow Creek on her pink bicycle. Her laughter was the kind that spilled into the air and made everyone else smile without knowing why. Her father was her hero. He would lift her onto his shoulders so she could see the fireworks. He would clap as she sang off-key in the living room. He would whisper to her at bedtime, "You can do anything, Clara Bear. Anything at all." But then came the night of the accident. It was raining hard, the kind of rain that blurred the world into streaks of gray. Clara's father had picked her up from her best friend's birthday party. She remembered clutching her gift bag on her lap, humming along to the radio. Then, screeching tires, a blinding light, a truck skidding through the intersection, impact. When Clara opened her eyes in the hospital days later, her world had changed. Her legs no longer listened to her. Her father was gone. The silence that followed was worse than the pain. She remembered lying in the hospital bed, tubes running into her arms, her mother holding her hand with red-rimmed eyes. "Where's Daddy?" Clara whispered. Her mother's face crumpled. "Sweetheart, he didn't make it." Clara stared at the ceiling. Her chest hurt in a way no doctor could fix. "Then I don't want to make it either," she whispered. Weeks stretched into months of therapy, doctor's visits, and whispered condolences she never wanted to hear. She smiled less and less. Her once bubbly voice quieted. She told her mom, "I don't think I'll ever feel happy again." So when she saw Atlas's picture online, a dog labeled hopeless, aggressive, dangerous, she saw herself. Because she knew what it felt like to be written off. Her mom hesitated, then slowly wheeled her forward until her chair was just inches from Atlas's kennel. Inside, the German Shepherd stiffened, eyes locked on the turning wheels of her chair. His body coiled like a spring, a warning growl deep in his throat. "Easy," Clara whispered. No one knew if she was speaking to him or herself. Her mother's heart thundered. "Clara, maybe we should—" "No," Clara said softly but firmly. "He's just scared." No one dared argue. Taking a shaky breath, Clara began to speak. "Hi, my name's Clara. I know you don't want me here. That's okay." Atlas' ears flicked forward. The growl faltered into a tired, uncertain whine. "I didn't want to be here either," Clara continued. Her eyes brimmed with tears. "When I got hurt, I thought my whole life was over." For the first time, Atlas stopped pacing. Slowly, he lowered his massive head to the ground. His shoulders loosened, his breathing slowed. The staff exchanged stunned glances. No one had ever seen Atlas do anything but snarl and pace. Clara lifted a trembling hand. Her mom gasped but didn't stop her. Her fingertips brushed against the cold steel bars. Atlas's amber eyes followed her hand, wary, calculating. "It's okay," Clara whispered. "I'm not here to hurt you." At first he flinched back. For a heartbeat, Clara doubted herself. But then, slowly, cautiously, Atlas stepped forward. His wet nose touched her fingertips. Clara's breath hitched. She turned her palm upward and waited. The German Shepherd leaned closer, pressing his scarred muzzle into her small hand. He exhaled a deep sigh, as if he'd been holding it for years. A volunteer covered her mouth to keep from sobbing. The manager wiped at her eyes. I can't believe it." Clara stroked his cheek, fingers brushing over rough fur. "You're not a bad dog," she murmured. "You're just sad." When Atlas opened his eyes again, they weren't the eyes of a monster. They were weary, and for the first time, full of hope. "Come here," Clara whispered, brushing her lap gently. And for the first time since he'd arrived at the shelter, Atlas crawled forward. He lowered his massive head into the crook of her arm. The entire shelter seemed to exhale all at once. Volunteers exchanged teary looks. Clara's mother dropped to her knees, pressing a trembling hand to her chest. She hadn't seen her daughter smile like this since the accident. It wasn't a big smile, but it was real. A fragile light breaking through endless darkness. Atlas trembled, pressing deeper into Clara's lap, as though afraid she'd vanish. The pacing, snarling creature was gone. In his place was a dog who finally belonged. "He's never let anyone touch him before," a volunteer whispered. Clara rested her cheek against his head, tears dripping into his fur. "You were just waiting for someone to love you," she whispered. And I was waiting too. Atlas released a deep, contented sigh, closing his eyes. That afternoon, when Clara's mom signed the adoption papers, no one mentioned caution. No one muttered danger. Everyone knew something unexplainable had happened. As they wheeled Clara out the doors, Atlas walking proudly beside her, the shelter erupted in applause. Staff wiped their eyes, knowing they had witnessed a miracle. Weeks later, neighbors in Willow Creek stopped in their tracks as they watched Clara and Atlas walking down their quiet street. Atlas stayed close to her wheelchair, matching her slow pace, his once wild eyes calm and steady. Some neighbors whispered, "That's the dog from the shelter. Dangerous. Be careful." But Clara would smile softly and whisper down to Atlas, "Don't listen to them. I know who you are." At night, when Clara couldn't sleep, she would stroke his fur and whisper secrets the way her dad once whispered to her. "Sometimes I miss him so much it hurts, Atlas. But when you're here, it hurts less." And Atlas, as if he understood, would press closer, his steady breathing wrapping her in safety. The girl who thought she'd never smile again began to laugh. The dog who thought he'd never trust again began to love. And in Willow Creek, everyone agreed. The day Clara met Atlas was the day they both came back to life. If Clara and Atlas touched your heart, imagine how many other lives could change with a second chance. Don't let their story end here. Share it so more people see the power of love and rescue. Subscribe now, because the next story might just be the one that changes you.